Hello everyone, I'm Mark Copolov. Howard Kaylan is an American rock and roll musician and writer, best known as a founding member and lead singer of the 1960s band The Turtles, and as Eddie in the 1970s rock band Flo Eddie. Howard worked with John Lennon, Frank Zappa and Bruce Springsteen, to name a few. His significant songs include Elenore, Happy Together and It Ain't Me Babe. We started off the interview by talking about how Howard started music in a choir and then went into a surfing band. Hello Howard, this is Mark Copolov.
Well, thank you, sir.
Howard, for anyone listening who doesn't know, which should only be a couple of people of course, you were the lead vocalist and one of the songwriters from the Turtles. I'd like to talk about your career, starting off with the fact that you sang in an a cappella choir at Westchester School. And what I found quite interesting was that after you started your first band, the Night Riders, you ended up playing surf music. So it was a bit ironic that you went from an a cappella band to a surfing band.
It was all the same. It's still the same. I still believe that music is music and that everybody should get an education, growing up as early as possible in all kinds of music. And it's really, I tell people now that bring their kids out to see us in concert that there are only two kinds of music, good and bad. And an a cappella choir and learning it, learning the ropes, learning the scales, learning, harmonies was very, very important to me later. And even growing up in that very surf band, it helped. It made us a more musical surf band, and it made us better, and the pay increased, and we figured it out pretty quickly that, all we needed to do was to keep growing and learning, and it never really stopped.
Right, and is it true that Mark Volman joined the Night Riders as a roadie?
He was all things. He came into the band because he saw the Night Riders play at our school at a function and was really kind of a groupie for the band and said, "Oh my God, I would really, really love to play with you guys. You sound terrific to me." And we said, "Well, we're open to anything. What is it that you do?" And he said, "Nothing." And we said, "Great, yeah, good, okay. Well, nothing, that's good. Okay, come to our house, we'll have a rehearsal." And then we got this gig at a college. And the college was, I think, UCLA, and we went down there to play for a fraternity party. And Mark was the roadie, in fact. And as he was loading the drum cases down the stairs to the frat house, he fell. And all the drums came tumbling down around him and stuff. But it was the infamous night that we drank the Red Death. And we'll always remember that vodka Hawaiian punch mixture over dry ice. And the night he fell down the steps, and the night I smashed my car. I think it was my 16th or 17th birthday. And it was infamous. Yeah, he was in the band forever, and he never really figured out what he did. I still don't know.
Well, of course, in the Turtles, you've told me before that it's Mark that does the high harmony in the songs, and
that's right. Thanks for refreshing my memory, Mark.
Okay. Now, you guys went on to a couple of bands, the Crosswind Singers and the Crossfires. Now, what's this about cross? Does that have any deep meaning in the name of your bands?
Not at all. We just were so bored. It didn't really mean anything. I mean, Crossfires was just kind of a violent, I don't know what it was, I don't know, a macho sort of a name. I don't know what we figured. It's true that our business card had an iron cross on it, to follow the theme of the name, but it didn't mean anything. I mean, we weren't, advocates of anything or trying to say anything with the music, certainly. We just wanted to be, surf dudes. And as our high school, Westchester High School, was only about a block and a half from the ocean, you had to sort of align yourself with one group or the other growing up. Right. It was either you were a surf group or you were they would say, Hodad group or greaser guy group. It was mods and rockers. It was the same thing that goes on today.
Of course, the thing is that you got a contract with White Whale Records, and then you became the Turtles, and I believe the original name was spelled Tyrtles.
That was one of the permutations we were toying with, the Turtles. The Turtles, as a name, it's true, was suggested by Reb Foster because he felt that the Crossfires as a name, wasn't a vocal group thing, and it was sort of a marginally violent or strange, at least, name for a group that was going to be vocal. We put down the saxophones that we had played in the Night Riders and the Crossfires as soon as the Beatles records started hitting, and realized that we could use our a cappella training to become a vocal group. And at that point, Reb said, I've been kicking this name around for a long time. It has an animal thing going for it. It has a TLES ending on it. This is a brand new record company you guys are on, White Whale Records here in America. Why don't we call it the Turtles? And that unto itself, without even the Y spelling, made us laugh, because we just thought, this guy's from outer space. I mean, we can't call ourselves that. That's a dumb, stupid name. What a klutzy, sort of a slow, idiot animal to fashion your group around. And yet we said, well, we got nothing to lose. What the heck, we're not making any money as the Crossfire. Sure, we'll try the Turtles. Put off the record. Let's see what happens.
Well, the thing is, Howard, wherever I've read anything about the Turtles, they always say the same things, that it was one of the best bands that came out of the 60s, highly regarded, strong vocals, great harmonies, strong songs, entertaining. You guys really made a huge impact. I mean, you had, about 4 top 10 hits, a number 1 with Happy Together, and it was just a huge band. And I'd like to talk about some of the songs, starting off with your first chart success, the Dylan cover, It Ain't Me, Babe. That was a top 10 hit for you.
Yes, sir. Well, here was the deal. As the Crossfires, Al Nickel, our lead guitar player, and myself had ventured down to the Sunset Strip one weekend to see this new band performing called The Byrds. The Byrds had yet to release a record. When we saw them there in concert at Ciro's, I believe, they performed this whole new thing, folk rock, with an electrified 12-string guitar, and we were mesmerized. And the next day, Al Nickel and I went to a store where he purchased not a very expensive, but still a pretty good 12-string electric guitar, and we proceeded to go through everybody's folk repertoire looking for songs that would be easily adaptable toward recording this new thing, folk rock music, whatever it was to be. It was during one of these performances at the Revelare Club that these two clowns from a record company, and I use the word clowns advisedly, they truly worked out to be clowns later, came up to us and said, you guys, this is the new thing. This folk rock sound of yours is the brand new thing. We'd like to get you into the studio. Do you have any songs? So we said, well, we've been kicking around as the Crosswind Singers. I had written a couple of tunes that were adaptable to electric, and I had found this Bob Dylan song that I didn't know anyone had ever covered before, when in fact Johnny Cash had a country hit with it.
Oh, okay.
It Ain't Me, Babe. And we played those songs for these record company clowns, and they selected It Ain't Me, Babe to be the single, and backed it up with a couple of songs that I had written. But the idea behind my concept of It Ain't Me, Babe was not Dylan's. It was a different sort of interpretation. It was I followed Cullen Blunstone's lead. I don't know if anybody in your listening audience is familiar with Cullen Blunstone, but as the lead singer of the Zombies, he did something that really was electrifying to me, and that was that he could take a very soft and sensitive verse and contrast it with a banging, crashing chorus and make you really believe him at the same time. I wanted to use that technique on It Ain't Me, Babe, and so it turned into a whole different sort of a song, of some sort of teenage angst, I suppose, at the time, and being unknowns as we were, and on a label as unknown as it was. I think it was being at the right place at the right time that got that record any recognition at all, but I'm darn grateful to Dylan and for everybody that bought it, and it's cool.
Howard, you mentioned about the folk rock aspect of it, but the Turtles were smart enough not to get locked into one sound, that is the folk rock sound. So you also did protest songs, good time rock and roll songs, you did songs which included sitars, psychedelia, and even sort of hard rock sort of stuff. And that must have been a conscious decision by you guys, I suppose, to diversify your sound. Is that right?
It was entirely conscious, yeah. After Let Me Be, the second Turtles hit in America came out, we realized this could not go on forever. First of all, we were upper middle class kids from a rather affluent white neighborhood, and we had nothing to protest except that we wanted newer cars and prettier girlfriends. So we weren't about that, and in 1966, when we went to New York City for the first time to do a couple of television shows, Ed Sullivan, etc., we ran into a band called the Love and Spoonful in Greenwich Village. They were just in the process of releasing their first record, and we watched these guys and realized they had stumbled onto something really, really great. And that was, screw all this protest stuff, we're going to have a really good time, and we're going to ignore this war. Yeah. And America was totally into the war at this particular period of time, and Mark and myself went down, in fact, the very same day for our draft interviews, which is a book unto itself, and a story that I'll have to tell you some other time. But in this era of turmoil for America, the Turtles, made a conscious decision to say, okay, we ignore it. Let's have a good time.
Just before we get on to the next hit, I just want to go back one step regarding the protest songs. You mentioned Let Me Be. Now, P.F. Sloan wrote that, as he did You Baby and Eve of Destruction. All songs you've recorded. How did you come across P.F. Sloan? I know of his songs, but I don't know who he is.
Well, in fact, P.F. Sloan had a deal with a guy named Lou Adler, who ran Dunhill Records, and his office was upstairs from the White Whale complex on Sunset Boulevard, so we ran into these people all the time. P.F. Sloan was just another struggling songwriter who, along with his partner later on, Steve Berry, would go on to write an awful lot of hit songs for a great many people. But when we met him, he was pitching Let Me Be as a follow-up. And as this singer-songwriter guy, P.F. Sloan came to our dressing room one night at a performance in Hollywood, and along with our producer, Bones Howe, at his side, proceeded to play us what he thought would be the greatest follow-up ever to our first record, It Ain't Me, Babe. And he played us Eve of Destruction. And we looked at each other in horror. We could not believe that anyone would have the nerve to say these things on the radio in a song, let alone the fact that we felt it would put a screeching halt to our career, whatever that was, after one hit. And we were just too petrified to do it. And he said, okay, I understand. I got somebody else for that. Then, of course, wound up using Barry McGuire. But it turned out to be a very political move, and even though it was a breakthrough record, it was a one-shot venture. P.F. or Flip or Phil Sloan then sang us his alternate record for us to perform, and that was Let Me Be, and that was teenaged angst again, and that was sort of white middle class protest. That was, Ma, let me grow my hair long, or let me stay out past 11 or something, and that we could deal with as a band, and that became our second hit.
All right, well, around this time, Chip Douglas came in as a bassist and producer. When I read about Chip, I think I put two and two together here, that he went on to produce the Monkees. Now, at the beginning of Daydream Believer, you can hear Davy Jones say something like, okay, Chip, don't get upset because I'm short. And that must be Chip Douglas.
It certainly is. They're one and the same. We went through a period of time where we had difficulty getting onto the charts with anything. The label decided to follow the success of our third record, You Baby, which was a good time record, up with many things that didn't hit the charts big time, like We'll Meet Again, and the rocky sort of outside chance that was very Beatlesque. Before Chip Douglas entered the picture, the Turtles were sort of floundering in an area of flux. We had people coming in and out of the band as disbelievers thought this was the end of the road for us guys as musicians. They realized that the lifespan of any rock band is approximately 18 months, and that we had our moment in the sun, and that was just about it. So we lost our bass player, and that's when we acquired, as a bass player first, Chip Douglas. Chip went on to play on the record Happy Together as our bass player, and toured with us for quite a while as our bass player before he became our record producer. That was years and years later, but he was instrumental in fashioning, even with another outside producer, Joe Wizard, the sound that was to characterize Happy Together.
Yeah, well, talking about Happy Together, that came out in 67, and apparently you found it in a batch of demo songs, and it's an Alan Gordon and Gary Bonner song, who you recorded a few songs. It just reminded me of Leslie Gore's story, because I remember reading once her producer was just going through some demos, and then they found It's My Party. So going through demos must be a bit of, you must feel like you've hit gold when you come across a song that you think, gee, we can really do something with this.
It's a great thing. I don't know if it still goes on very much in this era of singer-songwriter successes, but it used to be a fantastic thing to go through a pile of then records in stacks and stacks submitted to you, especially when you had a hit or two under your belt by huge publishing companies, all vying for the artist's next single. So it was a great treat, and you'd stumble upon these small gems, and some would wind up on albums, and some wouldn't make the cut, and some you would regret later not recording that would go on to be huge hits for other people. I remember turning down the demo to the Three Dog Night hit Celebrate, thinking that, this just isn't going to work. No one's buying this stupid ball in the woods thing, it's just not a viable product. And then kicking myself later for not seeing, oh yeah, what a great chorus. We really could have done that. That would have been great for us. But, it was a mixed blessing, but I do miss it. I wish everyone in the world would send me demos. I would love to hear them all.
Happy Together was number one for 3 weeks and one of the biggest hits of 67, and it went platinum. So you must have been really thrilled hearing yourself on the radio so many times. All that hard work had paid off.
It was eerie, and it is still. I don't think anyone ever gets over that feeling, no matter how much they put on airs and say that it doesn't affect them. When you walk through a mall and you hear your song being played on the loudspeaker system, of course you feel something. There's a glint of recognition or some sort of affirmation or hey mom, hey dad, look, I did it. Considering that growing up like most kids, my parents said, you better get a regular job. And I was the guy who told them, I want to do this instead and give me 6 months, and if I don't have a hit, I'll go back to school. And I had that hit, that first record, in 4 months. So it can be done. If you're determined enough to do it, certainly can be done. But it still feels like the first time every time you hear it.
I think John Lennon did the best thing. He was brought up by his aunt, Mimi, and she kept on saying to him when he was trying to break into music, she said, John, it's a good thing playing the guitar, but you'll never make a living out of it. And once Beatlemania hit, apparently he bought her a silver tray with that inscribed on it.
Oh, well, I didn't do that. I couldn't go that far, but I did do the trip to Hawaii for the family and the TV set,
All right. Yeah.
Here you go. Here's success for you. See, I didn't need that degree after all. Maybe one of these days I'll get it, and maybe one of these days I won't. See how good this career can be. So 33 years later, it's hanging in there.
Howard, moving on, the next 3 singles were written by Bonner and Gordon, and each hit top 20, and the next hit reaching hit number 3 was She'd Rather Be With Me. What are your recollections of that song?
Well, Bonner and Gordon had proven with Happy Together success that they were the new wunderkinds of Copolov-Rubin Associates. This was a company, a huge conglomerate out of New York City. They happened to own the song Happy Together. Coincidentally, they owned the Lovin' Spoonful. So the Turtles were extremely gratified all of a sudden to find themselves being the West Coast band with now an East Coast link. And that proved to be very, very true. Copolov-Rubin also managed or owned the services of the guy that was to become our producer, Joe Wizard. And with Bonner and Gordon and Joe Wizard as a team, they sort of told us, in a matter of speaking, what our next single was to be. They actually gave us a choice of 2 or 3 Bonner and Gordon songs, and the strongest at the time we felt was this vaudevillian, She'd Rather Be With Me. And even though I had moderate hopes about the song, I wasn't quite sure when I heard it. I thought it was a fun thing, but I realized it didn't have the Happy Together sort of magic thing going for it. It was quite accessible as far as television and as far as expanding our audience into a higher demographic than we had as teenage rockers. And it proved itself to be so, not only internationally as a bigger record than Happy Together wound up to be, but here in the States it opened up all sorts of doors for us on television. We were America's safe, darlings for quite a while, based on the vaudeville-like sound of She'd Rather Be With Me.
You had a bit of bad luck with the next couple of releases, but then you, Howard, wrote one of my favourite songs from the 60s, and that's Elenore. What a great song. There must have been so much competition around the 60s as a writer to write a song that would stand above the others, but you did it with Elenore, didn't you?
First of all, thanks. And second of all, the misconception here is that the Turtles' career stopped after She'd Rather Be With Me, when in fact, due to Bonner and Gordon and that Koppelman-Rubin connection, in America at least, the Turtles' success continued. We had a hit record immediately following that one called She's My Girl, and another one after that called You Know What I Mean, and both of these records were top 10 or top 20 records in America. So it was after that period of time when the group decided it wanted to sort of be its own entity and manage itself and choose its own route, that any pressure was on us at all. In fact, we were in Chicago on tour when we got a phone call from the record company saying, you guys, we got to have another one big. I mean, big, 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 because Top 20 wasn't big enough for them. We were their only artist. Even though they tried with others, they failed for the most part. So the pressure was on us to deliver for them. We didn't know it at the time, but they were stealing money from us left and right, and had we known, we probably wouldn't have been so cooperative. But they kept saying over and over again, especially to me, because they figured I would be the writer, I would be the singer guy. You got to give us another Happy Together. You just got to give us another Happy Together. It became very, very irritating. In 1968, at the end of the year, going into 69, we were staying at a hotel in Chicago that we would rent out for weeks and weeks at a time, and we would write songs, and we would base ourselves out of there because it was central to most of the American people, and we had our own plane, and we had our own limos, and we were spending the money as fast as we could make it, certainly. I was just fed up with these guys, and I locked myself in a room, and I said, you want Happy Together, you idiots, I'll give you Happy Together. So I methodically went through the song, and everywhere I figured out that Happy Together went up, I went down, and every place that Happy Together did this, I did that. And then I put these little rancid teenage lyrics to the thing, and I figured, here, you sons of bitch, now here's your Happy Together, see what you can do with this one. Figuring that, haha, I had some sort of a joke going, when in fact, when I performed it for these guys, they went, yeah, this is terrific. This is exactly what we're looking for. Yeah, all the yes, this is great. And we recorded the thing, now with Chip Douglas as producer, to be on this Battle of the Bands album that he envisioned. It was a huge hit, much to my surprise, and not evidently to everyone else's, but a lot of those people out there just still, to this day, don't get the joke.
There are two things there. With the joke, I suppose you're talking about that line where you sing, you're my pride and joy, etc. So I suppose it's a parody on Moon and June songs. Is that what you're saying, that they didn't understand that satire in it?
Yeah, that's part of it. And the whole gee, I think you're swell. I mean, that certainly wasn't dialogue that was used in the 60s or 70s. This is like some retarded sort of a 1950s throwback to neat and clean, Leave It to Beaver lyrics or something. I figured they would get a chuckle out of it, and that would be just about it, and we would get on with our lives and look toward more progressive tunes. Yeah. I never figured at all that it would become a hit.
And with the music, just going back to that, Howard, are you saying that you sort of got Happy Together and turned it upside down and played it backwards, and that's how you got the basis of the chord progression for Elenore?
Yeah, pretty much. I've always been a twisted sort of guy.
Yeah, okay. Talking about this song, it got a BMI award because it's been played more than 1 million times on US radio. That equates to 30 years of continual playing. So it's funny to think that you sat in that room doing this song that you didn't think would go anywhere, and it's been played over 1 million times on American radio. It's an amazing feat.
It's a bitter irony, Mark, and a hard pill to swallow, and even more difficult to believe that every week for the last 30 years I've been going out and performing it. So I've lived the nightmare.
But the song is so interesting. I mean, the beginning of the song, right from the very first note, you've got some sort of keyboard or synthesizer in there. It's just a very interesting song. How long did it take to record?
In actual fact, that took quite a while to record because it was the first use I know of, at least in a top 10 American record, of the Moog synthesizer. And we had the guy actually come into the studio and set up banks and banks and banks of equipment. Of course, now you can do it on a little Casio keyboard, but then you really needed the entire room to be filled up with patch cords and buttons and boxes and stuff, all to produce the stuff for that album. And this little haunting, ethereal, mellotron-like sound that he got for Elenore, flute-like in other parts, is part of the sound, but one of the things that took the longest to do. Also, about that record, we sort of sped it up. After we heard the thing in the studio, we went, yeah, that's the kind of song you could really just kick up a little bit. We said, let's kick it up a little bit. Therefore, everything sounds just a little fatter than it truly is. Though we kept the drums and all that, the voices, everything is just a little sped up. You can hear it if you listen hard enough.
You had another hit, you reached number 6, and that's You Showed Me. Now, that was originally written and recorded by the Byrds?
Yeah, it was. In fact, they never released it, but they did write it. That is to say that Jim McGuinn, not Roger yet, but Jim McGuinn and Gene Clark wrote the song, and they wrote it to be a very, very fast, beatly song, very Mersey beat, very cha-cha. You show me how to do exactly what you do, how I fell in love with you. Wow. Chip Douglas, once again, instrumental in our career, as our producer now, said to us, I got a great song for you guys. And he attempted to show us this up-tempo, You Showed Me. This was up at his home in Laurel Canyon, where we all lived in Los Angeles. Only Chip Douglas had to play it on a broken pump organ. That was the only keyboard he had available to him. And the pump organ just couldn't play that tempo. It wound up coming out like that as a ballad, and Chip kept apologizing. And once again, Mark and I were pretty much in control of the situation at this point, looked at each other and said, yeah, as a ballad, this is beautiful. I said, no, this is not a ballad. We said, we think so. And we treated it very softly and intimately, and we added the strings. Yeah, You Showed Me was a big hit. And it was a moderate hit again with its inclusion in the motion picture Austin Powers. We sort of had a resurgence of popularity with that tune. Yeah, boy, you horny. Dagadelic, baby.
Yeah, well, inspired by the Kinks' recent Village Green Preservation Society album, the Turtles recruited the brilliant frontman of the Kinks, Ray Davies, to serve as producer for your 1969 album Turtle Soup. Now, 2 singles came out of that, Love in the City, and the one I want to ask you about is You Don't Have to Walk in the Rain. Now, I can imagine the Four Seasons doing that song.
Oh, I don't know about that. I never thought about that. I really figured it was just another one of those turtle-y songs that I was sort of forced to write with a soft verse and a bit of satire, quite a bit of satire, and a strong chorus, the thing that would always sort of be with us forever. Never looked at it beatily. I'm flattered.
The high singing in it sounds a bit like Frankie Valli. That's what I was getting at.
Ah, well, cool. All these years later, I learned something.
Well, it's just my opinion. But anyway, what was it like being in the studio with Ray Davies? Because he is one of the people I want to interview the most in the world. I think he was a brilliant songwriter. What was he like to work with?
Ray Davies is magical. Yeah, he's magic. He remains that way to me. Enigmatic and magical, and as mysterious and wonderful on stage and with a pen in hand as he ever was to this day. But back then, we pretty much had our choice of producers, and we knew it. White Whale had given us our shot at producing ourselves, and we had come up with weak attempts at best to get back onto the charts, psychedelia and other throwbacks to our earlier hits and things that really weren't going for us when we were producing ourselves after the success of You Showed Me. So we were allowed then to bring in an outside producer. They would spring for it. This little record company that didn't want to pay for anything agreed to spring for a record producer. And we looked around, and we talked to people, and we listened to records. We literally had our choice. Anybody we wanted, we could have selected. He would have become our record producer. And we listened to Beatle records, and we listened to Stones records, and we listened to Kinks records. And at the time, Village Green Preservation Society had just come out, and we were just enchanted, and we knew, being Kinks fans before anyway, all through Ray's career, this was the guy. And we called him up when we were in St. John's, Newfoundland, which, my God, is the other end of the world even for us, Yanks. It literally is the farthest point north and east on the North American continent. And we figured we would never get closer to Ray Davies than right there. And from a hotel room, we placed a phone call to Derek Taylor and got the number of Ray Davies at home, called him up and said, "Hi, Ray, you don't know us. We're the Turtles." And he said, "Oh, yeah, those Happy Together blokes." And we said, yeah, well, that's us. "Would you like to produce us?" And he said, "Yeah, I'll be right over." Turns out that he was going to resolve things with his marriage and his record company as well, and this gave him the perfect excuse to come to the U.S. and spend a couple of weeks recording Turtle Soup with us. It was also different, not only with Ray's input, but due to the fact that just prior to this record, I had quit the band. I had just walked out. I figured this was just going nowhere fast. And when Ray came into the picture, I had barely re-entered. I think I was out of the group for like a month and a half, and they didn't do anything, and I didn't do anything, and then we finally resolved our differences. But in that month and a half, everyone had written their own material, and it's that material that turns up produced by Ray Davies, sung by all the members of the Turtles for the first time, and the last on Turtle Soup.
Would have been a real inspiration working with a songwriter of that caliber, seeing that you're a songwriter yourself.
Oh, yeah. Oh, certainly. And there are songs on the Turtle Soup album that are tailored for Ray. Songs like Bachelor Mother that are so obviously Kinks kind of songs. We knew what he would do with those things once he got him in the studio, and he certainly did. He, in fact, mixed the album twice. The first mix, we're threatening ourselves one of these days to release. That mix has a lot more orchestra on it. Ray, at the time, was very enchanted with using large orchestras. We wanted it more as a group, and he wanted it more as an orchestra, and so we sort of clashed there a little bit in the mixing phase of Turtle Soup. But on the second mix, we got the one that we used.